welcome to another episode of Metal, Meeples, and Beer. I am Rob himself. It's 2019, and to kick it off properly, I thought I would do another Robb review. Today I've selected Container from Mercury Games, a game I played a lot over the last few months and thought it would be the perfect game for me to kick off 2019 with. But before I get to any of that, I am definitely having a beer. Today I'll be drinking the Fat Tug IPA from Driftwood Brewing in beautiful Victoria, BC. And while I'm drinking that and while I'm doing this video, I'm going to be listening to the band Underoath, particularly their album Lost in the Sound of Separation. Underoath has been one of my favorite bands over the last 10 or 15 years or so. And yeah, I'm going to be listening to that while I do this video. It's super badass. If you guys ever get the chance to go see them, do so, okay? So while I get this game set up, sit back, relax, grab yourself a pint, join me at the table as we take a look at Container from Mercury Games. Cheers. Okay, well, let's just jump right into it here. You will see I have a 3-player game of Container set up here on my table. I'm pretty limited on space here, so you don't even really see the full board for each of the 3 players, including the other 2 parts of the game up here. I'm really tight on space, and this game is a bit of a hog, so I'll move some things around to show you as we go if something's kind of out of sight. But yeah, okay, so this is Container from Mercury Games. It's a buying, selling, and auctioning game of containers, so we are literally creating our own economy within this game. People falling into different roles, whatever that might be, and usually dictated by where you are seated at the table in turn order. So some people will be producing containers, some people will be buying containers, somebody will be selling them wholesale, some will be selling them retail, and eventually auctioning them off to be sold to the highest bidder. So how do we play the game? There are a few actions we can do. Each player has, first off, let's start with this. Each player has a player board, like you see in front of you, this blue player board here. It comes with a factory that produces the same colored container that you see right here. They also have a boat that matches their color. They also have a warehouse which houses containers after you've purchased them on your loading docks here. And then we have the island over here, which is going to be where we do our auctioning. Then we have the investment bank over here, which is kind of an AI part of the game that you can use if your competitors aren't really helping you out with buying and selling goods. You can kind of go over there to do your own thing. Yeah, so those are the kind of the parts of the board. Everybody also has a secret scoring card, which is sitting in this spot. Everyone just gave one at random at the beginning of the game. And it's going to tell you, if I can get this in focus, what your containers will be worth at the end of the game that you collect. For instance, this character or this player will have 10 points for every purple container they own at the end of the game, 5 or 10 points for every tan that they own at the end of the game, depending. 6, 4, and 2 down the line there. The depending part of this is that if you have at least one of every container, every color of container, purple, tan, gray, black, and brown, you will then be able to score your tan containers for 10 points apiece. If you're missing one color, you will then only score the tan for 5 points apiece. And everybody else will have a similar card with the colors in a different order, okay? So that's your end of game scoring. So what do? We will be doing several different things on our turn. We can only do 2 actions though, but there's several different things you can do. There are the factories here, which are these little units here. Everyone starts with a different color and a container matching that color on the $2 space. Okay, what you can do is install another factory, if you like, of a different color down here. You can kind of see there's a number 6 right there, and number 9 there, and number 12 there. So you can install 3 more factories for those different price points. $6, $9, and $12. Everybody starts with a hand of cash of $20 plus 2 zero cards, and I'll explain what those are for later. You can produce, or you can install a new factory of a different color than you start with. You can place it there for $6 to the bank, which is over here. And then when you do produce that, or when you do place that factory, let's say the blue player decided to create a black factory on their turn, paid $6 to the bank, they'd place it right there. Another action they could do would be to fire these factories up and produce containers. And they would produce a container of each color that they have a factory for. In this case, a purple and a black. And what they would do is be able to sell these, price them out at whatever price they want, whether it's $1, $2, $3, or $4 for these containers. Generally speaking, early on in the game, you're probably going to keep them fairly low. And we'll say that right now, we're selling those containers for $2 a piece. So those are two actions they could do at the very beginning of the game. Creating a new factory, firing up the factories to produce 2 new containers, and setting a price for them. Those are 2 actions. Another action you could do, if you hadn't done that, is install another warehouse. These are the warehouses. They go on this row right here, and it's the same kind of deal. For $4, $5, $6, and $7, we can install new warehouses. And the warehouses are used to house containers after you purchase them from your competitors. For every container that you want to purchase from a competitor, you have to have at least 1 warehouse. Okay? So for $4, you could spend to the bank over there, which would allow you to take in a new warehouse and place it right here. That's another action you can do. Another action you could do would be to move your boat around, from whether you want to move it to another person's port, or to the island, or to the investment bank, or wherever you'd like to go. So those are the general movements and actions you can do. Creating a factory, producing containers, creating a new warehouse, or moving your boat around the ocean or to other ports. Okay, so let's just start kind of at the beginning here. Let's say first player here wanted to get some new containers rolling out. So they wanted to produce a new factory here for $6, fire them up for a second action, creating these, pricing them at $2. That's the end of their turn. Second player, let's say it's green over here. This is what their board looks like. They have a brown factory and a brown container set at $2 with 1 warehouse and their end of game scoring card. They would see that those containers are for sale from the blue player. Perhaps they would want to start building some warehousing to house those containers, because what they're going to want to do is purchase them from him in this wholesale row to sell them at their shipping docks here, kind of retail, you know? So they would purchase those potentially from the blue player. But to do that, they're probably going to want to install another warehouse, because for 1 action you can buy as many of these as the blue player has that you're able to house. So for 1 action they could install another warehouse over here for $4, and on the second action they could buy 2 of these containers and place them on this part of his board because of these 2 warehouses. So the blue player has those containers set at $2 a piece. So maybe the green player wants to buy them a purple and a black. He would simply pay the blue player $4, take them, and then price them whatever price they would like to price it at. Bought them for $2 over here, likely want to make at least $1 off them, and sell them for $3 on this side of the board. And that would be the 2 actions that the green player did: installing a new warehouse and purchasing these from the blue player for $2 a piece. I should also mention, when you fire up your factories as an action, you would pay $1 to the player to the right of you. In this case, would have paid the red player $1 to produce new containers with these factories. Okay, so the green player has purchased a new warehouse, installed it, and bought 2 containers and placed them over here because you can only have 2 because of only having 2 warehouses. Okay, so then it would move over to the red player. The red player would see that the blue player has started being a container producer by installing factories, sees that the green player is starting to get into the warehousing game by installing warehouses and purchasing containers. So the red player might see that they would want to get involved in this economy by possibly purchasing these containers at the retail level over here. So for an action, they can move their boat over to the green dock, and included in that action would be to purchase the containers from the green player for $6. Two of them at $3 a piece, so $6. They could purchase both of them, paying $6 to the green player, loading them onto the ship. That was all one action, moving the boat into the port and purchasing the two. They're included in the same action. As a second action, they could do something on their board if they like. They might want to, install another factory here perhaps, or maybe get into the warehousing part of the game as well by putting in a warehouse here. Or maybe they just want to move their boat. And what they could do is just move their boat back out to sea. So not committed to any part of the board. And those are the general main kind of actions that are going to go on in this game. Producing, purchasing them from each other to sell at your own loading dock, people coming to your loading dock to purchase them, to put them on their boat. And those are the general actions. The whole idea is to do these type of actions, creating your economy of buying, selling, and loading up your boat with containers so that you can take a fully loaded boat out to the island. And that's where things get really, really interesting, which I'll explain in a minute. Okay, so I fast forwarded a little bit here. As you can see, the ships are starting to fill up with containers. The boards are starting to fill up with containers as these guys have produced more factories to produce more containers. They're buying them and selling them from each other at various prices. For instance, green has bought a bunch of containers from one of the other two, and vice versa. So what we have here is about 5 or 6 turns into the game of people producing, buying, selling, and eventually bringing their ship over to the island. So the whole point is to get your ship full of containers and over to this island to auction off the contents to the highest bidder between your competitors. So what happens now, the second the red player has entered the island, his turn is over, and it goes to a closed auction. So the blue player and the green player in this game would be able to bid whatever amount of cash they want on the entire contents of this red ship. So they look at it and they compare it to the end of game scoring that they have. And they're looking to hopefully get their hands on some purple, this particular player, and some tan and some gray, and everything's valuable to a degree, but purple being the most. They might want to look at this particular boat because it does have 2 purples on board, as you can see there. So those would be 20 points for them at the end of the game, right? So they would look at this boat and they would bid whatever amount of cash they want to bid. It could be as little or as much as you want. So they would place their bids on the table. One there, as many cards as they'd like. They reveal them at the same time. There's a $5 bid here and a $10 bid here. So the red player can sell the entire contents of this ship to the blue player for $10. So the blue player would get all these containers loaded onto his section, or her section, of the island. As you can see over there, it's split up into the 5 different colors. Now those containers that they purchased will count at the end of the game towards this end of game scoring card. Okay? Cool thing is, though, that the red player would get the $10 that was the highest bid from the blue player. They'd also get an additional $10 subsidy from the government thematically. Okay? So they would end up with $20 for that load. And this is where cash gets injected into our economy in this game. So, yeah, they would have sold that for quite a lot of money. Another thing could have happened. The red player could have found that the bid that was the highest was perhaps maybe an example like this. Perhaps the two bids were a $5 bid and a $4 bid. And maybe the red player thought that that was not a good enough bid for the entire contents of their ship. What they would do is, if they had the money to do it, they could match the highest bid and purchase it themselves, the entire load. So if they had $5 and $5 was the highest bid, they could say, you know what? I'm going to take it myself. Keep your money. They spend $5 and they take the whole amount for themselves onto their section of the island. Now, that $5 subsidy, so that matched subsidy that would have come to the government, right? This $5 that would have otherwise been doubled and given to the player that purchased the whole shipment would then instead be split up into equal denominations and laid out on this part of the board. Now, this part of the board is an expansion from the original game, which I will explain in a second. Okay, so this part of the board here, I've got it switched around. I moved the blue player over there and brought it a bit closer, is the investment bank part of the board. It's an addition, like I said, an expansion from the original game. It's something I really enjoyed that they added to this game. So what would happen is that $5 that was subsidy that the player would have otherwise doubled had they sold their whole shipment instead of buying it themselves, that subsidy ends up over here in equal denominations, laid out in these 3 rows. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, until you run out of cash. And these piles are going to start to grow through the game, through that action. Because of players buying their own shipment, money will then start to pile up over here. So the reason this will become important is that during the game, as cash starts to build up on it, say it's starting to look something like this. This starts to look pretty nice for players to try and get their hands on these piles of cash, because at the end of the day, cash and victory points are the same. They're equal at the end of the game. So you could win this game with a whole pile of cash and very little containers if you really wanted to, if it worked out that way. So how do players get their hands on these piles of cash? Well, as an action on their turn, they can use these 2 cards. So these 2 cards, as an action, let's say they really wanted this pile of cash. Maybe this was the highest pile of cash out there. They could say, as an action on my turn, I'm going to select this pile of cash, and they're going to use this card, and they're going to bid containers that they may have laying around on their player boards to bid on these piles of cash. Maybe they have containers that aren't doing anything for them. People are ignoring them. They're being, outpriced by everyone else, and they're getting fed up. So they decide to use their containers that are doing nothing for them and bid on this cash. So what they can do is, let's say the red player had some containers here and some containers up here. They could take any containers they want and bid using this card on that pile of cash. You can see that it's split into 2, referencing the top row with the warehousing and the bottom row with the factories. So they could take 2 containers from their factory side and lay it on this side of the card, and say another 2 containers from the warehouse side and put it on this side of the card, keeping them separate in the case that they get outbid, that they know what side to put these containers back onto their player board. Okay, that's the only reason. So let's say this player said, I'm going to use one of my actions and I'm going to bid on this pile of cash using my 4 containers, 2 from that side and 2 from this side. Now that is locked into place. And everyone will now have the chance to try and outbid, say the red player that put these on here, going around the table as an action on each player's turn. They have the chance to outbid them, the red player. So someone could bid 5 containers, for instance, like the blue player has here. They've got 3 there, 2 here. They could outbid this player. So let's say that they did that. The blue player, it's their turn now. they say, no, an action, I'm going to outbid you. The red player would take his containers back, putting them onto the proper side of the board, pricing them at whatever they would like at this point. And the blue player would take their 5 containers and place them on this card. Taking them all from the factory side, laying them down there, and then now it's locked into him. So as the round goes around the table, if no one outbids him, he simply wins the cash. If it comes back to him without being outbid, this cash ends up in the pocket of the blue player, and his containers are going to get laid out much like the cash we saw before, but on this side of the table, or the side of the board, equally, randomly, down the rows. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Or in this case it was 5. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Now, the opposite is available. As an action on somebody's turn, these containers might start to look pretty interesting. Maybe they'll help you with your end of game scoring or something to that degree. And maybe you really want to get your hands on that pile of containers. So as an action on your turn, you can use this card, flip over the container card to this side, and simply bid cash on this pile. If that's the pile you want, you can select whatever pile you want, but you can select, say, that pile and say, I'm bidding $7 on these 4 containers. Now, if it goes around the table without the whatever player this is, the bid on it being outbid, they get the containers. The cash would get broken down equally, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, so on down the line, building up on these piles. The containers that they just purchased are going to end up, let's say it was the blue player, are going to end up sitting and waiting on their little dock section here. Now, those containers are now available for, say, the blue player here to come in and pick up, to load onto their boat at some point during the game, to hopefully get over to the island to auction it off. And that's how that part of the game works. So as this game goes on, turn after turn, this is the general idea that will be happening. People will be producing containers, selling them off to other people to sell at their loading docks, for other people to come in to purchase them from those players, to take them over to the island, to auction them off to the highest bidder, potentially buying the whole shipment themselves. They can also use the investment bank, bidding on these piles of cash using extra containers they have, or vice versa, bidding cash on these piles of containers that will start to build up over here using extra cash they might have on hand. You also, at any point in the game, can take out a loan, which will be good for $10. You just get taxed $1 every turn that it stays in your possession, and at the end of the game is worth negative points if you still have it in your hand. You can have 2 of them and no more at any given time. And talking about the end of the game, how does it work? The end of the game is triggered the second that 2 of these piles of containers in your pool are empty. So if we were able to get rid of all the black and all the purple containers on one turn, the game would be over that turn. These nice inserts are not part of the game. They're provided by Meeple Realty, who I met down in Dallas at BGG Con this year and got it from them. Yeah, great people, great product. Thanks again, guys. Cheers. So yeah, the end of the game is triggered the second that 2 of the 5 colors have ran out. So what happens at the end of the game is everyone reveals their end of game scoring card. Okay? And they look at what their pile of containers are in their section at the end of the game. So for instance, let's take a look at the green player. They're looking for black for the most points. Brown potentially will get them 10 points if they have at least 1 of each color. 6 points for purple, 4 points for tan, and 2 points for every gray. So if we look at what they have here, they have 2 black, 4 black, 3 brown, 1 purple, 1 gray, and 2 tan in their section of the island. The thing at the end of the game is, though, that whatever container you have the most of, in this instance, green has 4 black being the most, those actually don't count. So this would be a rough score, final score for the green player if this was the case. They would have hopefully wanted to get their hands on at least 1 more brown, or say 2 more tan, so that at the end of the game when it's triggered, they get to decide which one they throw away. Hopefully they would have at least the same amount of tan, so that if they have a tied amount, they could just choose which one they wanted to get rid of. So in this instance now, they'd be able to get rid of the tan out of their possession, throw them back into the box, and then start scoring their final score. They would take 40 points for the black. They have 4 of those. They would take another 40 points for the brown because they did have at least 1 of each. That counts before you throw away, obviously, your the one you have the most of. So they did have 10, so that will count for 10 apiece. The purples will get them 6 points, and the gray down at the bottom will get them 2 points for that one there. And you'd add that with your cash that you have on hand, which could be a lot or very little. You combine that together, as well as various points from other places on the board. You get points from the containers on your ships. You get points for the containers sitting in your warehouse in the investment bank. You get points for the containers sitting in your loading bay, but I believe you get no points for the ones in here. But you get minimal points for those type things. Obviously not as advantageous as auctioning them off, but they will get you points nonetheless. So you add up whatever your final score is here with your multiplier, plus your cash on hand, plus the points that might be sitting in the various places around the board. Add those together, and that's your final score. You compete against your other players to see who has the highest score that way. Like, some people win with a ton of money, some people win with a ton of containers, some people have no containers. I've actually seen that before, where the person only had maybe 1 or 2 containers sitting here and had a whole pile of cash that they won this game with, or vice versa. I've seen people collect their final scoring near perfectly through the game, and use this multiplier to win. I've seen the game win with 60 points, and I've seen the game win with 160 points. So it can be quite different from game to game depending on player count. It goes to 5. That's the way I prefer it. I really like the chaos that 5 players brings, but a lot of people prefer the three-player version. But yeah, it scores very differently depending on who you are, what kind of player you are, who you're playing with, how many players you're playing with, and so on, because you really are just creating your own little economy with this game. Yeah, and that's about the gist of the game. If you have any questions, hit me down in the comment section. And yeah, hopefully that made sense. I'll start cleaning this up. I'll have a drink of my beer, and I'll give you my final thoughts on Container. Right? Cheers. Well, there you have it, folks. That was Container from Mercury Games. I'm just going to come out and say it. This is one of my favorite games of all time. It is easily inside my top 10 games. It's a super solid game that I've become obsessed with over time, and it's addicting and just incredible to play, especially with 5 players. It feels very, very authentic as far as an economy goes. It really feels like you're buying and selling with some major corporations, and yeah, you get in on different levels. You get in at retail, you get in at wholesale, you're producing, you're buying, you're selling, you're auctioning, you're trying to screw with each other too at some points. There's a part of it I forgot to mention, the $0. So when you're doing your bids at the island on these full full shipments of containers, if you have a $0 bid in your pile of cash, say this was my bid that I put in, and I reveal it to have a 0 in it, my whole bid is nullified. So you can use that to bluff big time. You can pretend that you're going in on this shipment with a whole bunch of money, just to mislead everybody into paying more money potentially than they wanted to, and the whole time you were bluffing with a $0 denomination inside your hand. So that's an awesome part of the game I didn't mention in the first part there. But yeah, this game is super cool. My crew and I, we play this, it seems almost weekly sometimes. It's great. So to begin with, first and foremost, the components, especially these ships, are next level. They're solid resin, so they're super heavy, and they feel very satisfying moving them around the board, carrying the containers around. The containers themselves are solid resin as well, so they have some major weight to them. So they feel very, very, very thematic and I don't know what the word is, but they just feel really nice on the table. It feels great in your hand. It feels great on the table. It's awesome. I like the player boards for the most part. The colors are nice. They can use probably some updating down the road, but that doesn't really mean anything. The lines and the numbers are everything is in place that you really need to see. The background is kind of secondary, and the ships, the ships make up for pretty much everything in this game. The way the bidding system works, I love the hidden bids. I love the fact that you can be bluffing in your bids. It's solid. It's super solid. It does not come with these trays. As I mentioned before, these game trays were given to me by people down in Dallas at BGG Meeple Realty. They're amazing component holders here. They fit in the box perfectly. These guys have really have an amazing thing going with their inserts for these boxes, like this guy here that holds the ships. It's yeah, really awesome. At one point, I think I was one of the only people in the world that had one of these at one point. So yeah, thanks again to Mercury Games and Meeple Realty for providing this for me. Yeah, so I can't say enough great things about this. My friends and I play this a lot. Every time it's a real hoot. We always end up laughing and cursing each other in this game. But at the end of the day, it's so much fun. It makes you want to play it again and again. After we've played it once, we generally want to play it again right away, just to make up for the mistakes you made in the previous game. Yeah, it's super solid. I can't recommend it enough. Go out and try and get a copy of this. You won't be able to get this copy easily. The jumbo edition with these ships is out of print. What's out there is out there. I know that Mercury has had a few copies that they've been bringing to different cons. Like at Shucks, they had some copies there. They had some copies at BGG. But whatever they're holding on to right now is about it, plus what might be sitting around there at retail. But that's it for this print run of this version of the game. They are planning on doing another version. What that version is going to look like, I'm not sure, but it will not be this big down the road. So if you can find a jumbo edition like this one right here, grab it, because there will never be another one like it. That being said, that'll be the end of my video. I've been drinking the Fat Tug IPA from Driftwood Brewery in Victoria, BC. I've been listening to Under Oath, specifically the album Lost in the Sound of Separation. Most badass band. Super incredible album. Go out and listen to it if you haven't. Again, this has been Metal, Meeples, and Beer. I am Rob himself. Thanks again for watching, everybody. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.